Good morning, everyone. The meeting will begin in a few minutes. Please take a minute to silence your phone, refresh your coffee, and find a seat. A quick reminder that masks must be worn while seated for everyone's safety. Masks may be temporarily removed when eating or drinking only. Please keep seats safely distanced. We are asking one attendee per table. Find a chair placed throughout if there is no tables at the chairs at the table. If you prefer to stand, please keep 6 feet away from the attendees nearby. It looks like everyone's being compliant, and we're very grateful for that. Thank you, and I'd now like to introduce Tom Tepizza.
Thanks, Jake, and good morning, everyone. I am Tom Tepizza, President of Knox Law and Chair of the Board of the Erie Regional Chamber, and I want to thank you for joining us today and to remind you that our annual meeting is one of the Chamber's signature events. It's a time to reflect on the work of the past year as well as the exciting opportunities on the horizon for businesses and the community at large. And what a year it has been. Last time we gathered in a group of this size was in this very location for our celebration of excellence in March, and nobody could predict how different our world would become really the very next day when the World Health Organization declared the global pandemic. While the challenges have certainly been harder on some businesses than others, Erie businesses have supported one another throughout it all. We're especially proud of the camaraderie among chamber members. Whether it was Auburn Florist leading the Green Ribbon campaign to support small businesses, Luminary Distilling, pivoting to create hand sanitizer for local hospitals and businesses, Scott Enterprises donating thousands of meals from this very location, other companies donating or producing personal protective gear to respond to our community's needs. I could go on and on. And through it all, the Chamber remained committed to our members and to the business community by providing awareness, advocacy, and access to key resources businesses needed to survive. The pandemic did not slow our commitment to move Erie forward on a broader scale. Our team continues to implement the goals outlined in our 5-year Economic Development Initiative, which we unveiled at last year's annual meeting at the Art Museum. Your participation today and your ongoing support of initiatives like Erie Forward not only strengthens the voice of our business community, but is the reason why the Chamber could continue assisting businesses during the last 9 months, which you'll hear more about later this morning. So before we begin, a special thank you to the sponsors of today's event, who I think are going to appear on the screen, but I will read their names. Highmark, Knox Law, National Fuel, Curtsy Food Services, Erie County Redevelopment Authority, and McDonald-Illig Attorneys. Thank you very much. And of course, we're very pleased and honored to have this morning as our keynote speaker, Governor Tom Ridge, Pennsylvania's 43rd governor and our nation's first Secretary of Homeland Security. Governor Ridge, we really appreciate your being with us, and we look forward to hearing from you shortly. So at this time, I'd like to call the actual business meeting to order, and this is our joint annual meeting of membership and of the Board of Directors. Although the Board of Directors will be sticking behind for just a few minutes after the member meeting this morning to take care of a few items of business. But under our bylaws each year, we elect or re-elect 1/3 of the members of our Board of Directors to 3-year terms, and then our board elects officers on an annual basis. I would like to thank Chris Marsh from Erie Insurance for chairing our Governance and Nominating Committee this year. Chris is with us virtually today, but I'm going to be presenting the report on behalf of the committee, which was very much a joint effort, but Chris provided excellent leadership for the group. So the motion for full membership to elect and approve the directors should be, I think, appearing on the screen, and there indeed it is. So for 3-year terms, which will end in November of 2023, we have Joe Cavalier from Wabtec, Phil English, Aaron Fox, Bruce Kern, C.A. Kurtzy Company, Craig Ulmer, Community Health Net, Michael Victor, Mercyhurst University and Frelo Industries, Brian Wagaman, Erie Federal Credit Union, and Matt Sono from Northwest Bank. I think we are also going to show a slide at this point of the officers, proposed officers for next year, which the board will be voting on following this meeting. You'll see Chair Chris Marsh, Vice Chair Dr. Chris Clark, Secretary Brenda Sandberg, and Treasurer Mike Edwards. So back to the slate of directors for the moment. This motion comes from a committee, does not require a second. So at this point, we will ask our virtual participants if they will follow on the screen to vote. And I would call for all those who are present in support of this motion to elect directors, please say aye. Are there any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. I don't see the virtual results, but I'm assuming we had a successful vote. In addition to our 4 new officers, we will be having additional members to our executive committee, which the board will be voting on, but we thought it would be important to share this information with you. Our committee this year will be joined by Phil English as chair of our Government Affairs Committee, by Ralph Ford as chair of our Economic Development Committee and the Erie Forward Investors Council. I will be remaining on the executive committee as past chair, and then we'll have the 4 officers. So we're very pleased with that group. And finally, the board will be approving 2 chair appointees. We actually have up to 5, but at this point we have 2 that the board is going to be approving, and those will be Amanda Duncan from Radius Cowork, who is the new president of Young Erie Professionals, and Tim Hunter from McInnes Rolled Rings, who has actually been on our board for 9 years, but will be a chair appointee for the next year to carry on some of the projects that he's been working on with us. So we will move to our last item on the business agenda, which is really a time to thank the rest of our board for their service. And the following you'll see on the screen are the 2 classes whose terms will be continuing. Serving through 2021, we have Ralph Ford from Penn State Barron, Marcia Marsh from Marsh Real Estate, Bob Mazza, Mazza Vineyards, Jack Munch, Baldwin Brothers, Brian Polito, Erie School District, Brenda Sandberg, Erie Western Pennsylvania Port Authority, and Keith Taylor from Gannon University. And the directors whose terms end in 2022 are Nick Austin, Penelec First Energy, Dr. Chris Clark, St. Vincent Hospital, Mike Colpoys, National Fuel Gas, Mike Edwards, Marquette Savings Bank, Christina Marsh, Erie Insurance, Jim Stevenson, PNC Financial Services, and myself. We'd also like to thank our outgoing officers who are completing their terms this year in their current capacities. Chris Marsh was our secretary. She will become our chair. Bruce Kern has served faithfully as treasurer. Boo Haggerty served as vice chair, and I served as chair. And I do want to note that this group of 4 really for the past 3 years has constituted our executive committee, which we deliberately kept small at a time when we were wanting to be nimble and sort of rebuild the infrastructure of the chamber. So I really can't thank that group enough. Very early on, Brenda Sandberg became our nominating chair, I think for the first 2 years of this last 3 years. And then Brenda became the inaugural chair of our new Government Affairs Committee. And at that time, when we amended our bylaws, then joined our executive committee. So we've had 5 this year, and we'll be expanding it to 7 next year. I'd also like to thank the board of directors whose terms are ending in 2020 and who will be leaving the board. And those include David Givens from UPMC Hammett, Boo Haggerty from Hammett Health Foundation, Jim Martin, Northwest Bank, Angela Price, E-Phase, who was the president of Young Erie Professionals in the past year, Jim Teed from Highmark, and Jenny Weigold-Geertsen from UPMC Health Plan. We want to thank all of them. I guess I would say in particular that we've lost track of how many years Boo Haggerty and Jim Martin served on the board. Jim had turned off, but when we assumed the programs of the Erie Innovation District this year, Jim then joined for a one-year term. But we're certainly grateful for all of the service that these folks have rendered, and I think it would be in order to give everybody a round of applause. So I do want to add my thanks again to all of you as members for supporting our mission and for all that you've done. We've had other groups and task forces as a part of Erie Restart that many of you have been involved in, and James will be discussing that later. So now it is my privilege to welcome James Grunke, our President and CEO, to the stage for his report.
Good morning, and thank you, Tom. It's nice to see all of you here. Thank you for taking the time. As you can see, we're still trying to figure out technology again. It's been so long since we had an in-person meeting. And as Tom said, the very last live event that we had was in this very room. And if those of you were there, you remember it was a little weird. We weren't quite sure, are we supposed to shake hands? What do we do? And then the following week is when we shut down as a community. And it seems very fitting to me that we're back in the Ambassador as we're trying to reopen. And the Chamber, this is actually our fourth in-person event that we've held since September. We believe it's our responsibility as a business organization to show how we can move forward with business in a safe and responsible way. And we appreciate you taking the time to come and be part of our annual meeting. So we'll see if the slides come up or not, but my team knows they can't follow me anyway, so I don't know if Colleen would know when to actually do the proper advance. So I just have a few general comments that I want to make this morning. As I reflect really back on the last 10 months of 2020, it's been first and foremost a year of recognition for your chamber. We started, which talked about in the past, in February of this year, we were recognized by Forbes magazine as the top urban impact zone community in the United States. And that's a really nice to see national recognition of what we're trying to do in our community. And most recently, we were recognized by the Erie Times for a commitment to Erie as a grand prize winner. And I'm not saying this to give ourselves a pat on the back, but it's very nice to see some of the work that we're trying to do is being recognized. And despite the pandemic, we've never wavered from the aggressive goals that we set and we outlined at last year's annual meeting. And economic development has not stopped in Erie, and it hasn't slowed down. 2 weeks ago, we held Erie Homecoming, which is really becoming our signature event. Last year, we really highlighted how do you do an in-person event. And this year, we did a very good job of showing how do you do a virtual event. And we couldn't have done it without community access media. And again, they're the ones who are responsible for our technology today. A big thank you to that team. They're a tremendous asset. It's been a blessing to actually get to know them and work with them, and so thank you. Perhaps the largest announcement from Erie Homecoming this year was the new partnership with Arcturus Impact Investors, in partnering with the Erie Community Foundation and the Erie Insurance, where they announced a $10 million investment fund looking for projects to fund in Erie. We have an RFP that's available on our website for any business or organization that's looking for funding for us to get this money deployed in our community. Some of the highlights for the last year, I just want to touch on quickly. Our primary mission always is what are we doing to help existing businesses grow and expand? That always has to be the keynote or keystone for our efforts. The pandemic actually allowed us to do our job better. We reached over 2,000 businesses since the shutdown, and we contacted them for their COVID-19 response. We called them, we met with them, we tried to understand what their needs were. We built, which I think, one of the best centralized data sources to get information on what's happening in the pandemic. We conducted 252 business retention visits in the last 10 months. We acquired the Erie Innovation District over the summer. And we hosted the 3rd Secure Erie Accelerator this fall. We've had 24 companies that have now been invested in as a part of the accelerator. Many accelerators across the country canceled their efforts this year. We decided that's not our business, is canceling events. Our business is moving forward. So we found we had over 40 applicants from around the world for our accelerator. We had 6 companies that were selected. We've invested nearly $200,000 into those 6 companies. And for the first time ever, we had Erie-based companies that were in the accelerator. 4 of the 6 companies are either in Erie or have an Erie connection. So we're very proud of the work that's happening with that, and I think we're going to see great returns in coming years. In the spring, we also completed the Garner Economic Workforce Development Delivery Assessment. Economic development has only really 4 basic plays: business retention, business startups, business attraction, but more importantly, workforce development. We cannot be successful in business attraction, business startup, business retention if we don't have a robust workforce delivery system. And we needed to make an assessment of where our community was and how these programs are delivered. And we don't do reports to do reports. We do reports to give us a roadmap to success. And so because of that work, we've been approached over this, again, the summer and the fall by the Erie Regional Manufacturing Partnership to also become part of our effort at the Chamber because of our alignment about workforce delivery. And we'll learn more about that in the coming months. That's an ongoing conversation. And again, economic development didn't stop. We've had new business investment and attraction in 2020. We've seen the announcement of the International Recycling Group of putting their plant here their very first plant here in Erie, which will be the largest outside investment in the history of Erie coming into our community. They came here largely as a result of the 2019 homecoming, but more importantly, when Erie Insurance announced that they had a $50 million Opportunity Zone fund that they announced at our homecoming event, IRG said, we need to come and learn what's happening in Erie. Whitethorn Digital, another local company, received $1.2 million from Erie Insurance to grow their business here. Just this week, a company we are really proud of working with called Data Inventions, that some of you actually in this room are not only customers but are investors in, also received a little more than $1 million of venture funding this week to grow their business in our community. We have many other success stories in this community, and some, I don't want to be confused. When we point out about other investment that's occurring in our community, whether it be the tremendous partnership between Penn State Barron and McGee Women's Center and the Community Foundation, or we point out that the Daria Devlin and her success at the ECAT is not to say we're responsible. We're saying investment is happening in all quarters of our community, and we want to celebrate everybody's investment and show that we're part of a much bigger picture. And so we love to see everything that's happening. We worked also on the quality of place. We spent some time in 2019 talking about, we created the very first Opportunity Zone investment prospectus in the United States. We also then followed up with the very first investment prospectus 2.0, which we called, which was about how to align public resources to invest in our community. And again, nobody else has done that other than Erie, Pennsylvania. And we're continuing to be a recognized leader. We also started in the spring what we called Erie Restart. We believed while we may have been ill-prepared as a community to go into a global pandemic and shutdown, we were not going to be ill-prepared to come out of it. So we put together a restart committee. We had a steering committee of about 50 community leaders. We had 4 working groups that worked on the issues that we need to be prepared for, that we could move forward meaningfully. Thank goodness that we actually had done Erie Forward, that our organization was actually prepared to lead these efforts. But we uncovered critical quality of place issues that must be addressed in a post-pandemic environment. We found out we're woefully unprepared to address childcare issues in our community, to have a workforce that's prepared to come back. We found we're woefully unprepared to give access to capital for minority and underserved populations. And we identified the need for a much more robust public health strategy. So while tremendous progress has been made in 2020, we realize this year we have a lot of work left to do to make this the transformational change this community is craving, and quite frankly, what we need to create sustainable growth. And for us, that begins with building diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives into the very fabric of our organization. Our team participated this fall in some training sessions with Dr. Rhonda Matthews from Edinburgh University. We needed to, before we could become a hopefully leader in what diversity and inclusion means in Erie, we needed to understand it as a team. And so we spent 2 days with Dr. Matthews understanding some of the issues and helping us create our strategy. That began our process of analyzing and improving our internal policies to ensure that we lead by example and that we're creating a work culture that is welcoming. We're continuing to actively reach out to underrepresented communities in all of our ongoing programs. We were so proud that we got to feature a dynamic young group in our homecoming event called Black Wall Street. We've really upped our efforts in trying to be an inclusive organization. And I'm also pleased to announce that we're going to sign the Nonprofit Partnerships Diversity and Equity and Inclusion Pledge. This work that we're doing does matter. And it will transform Erie, and it's within our grasp. And we did what I think is this great work, thanks to all of you, our members. Without your support, none of this would be possible. And before we continue with our event, I would like to call attention to some of our members. To our new members, during a time many businesses were faced with the difficult decisions to minimize expenses, you chose to double down on your business by investing in the Erie Regional Chamber, so thank you. And I'd also like to recognize those members that have been part of our organization for over 20 years. Your steadfast belief in our ability to become a difference and bring value to each of you is humbling, and we deeply appreciate your support. And lastly, I'd like to ask Tom Tapizza to come back to the stage. We have gifts to recognize Tom as his 3 years as the chair of the board. When I was first recruited to come to Erie, one of my questions was, would Tom be willing to stay on for at least another year as the chair of the board, just to give me some consistency? And I think that stretched into 2 years. And I so appreciate everything that you've done for me personally and professionally. And I think I can't imagine a better leader than Tom Tapizza. He's given me whatever success we've had, so thank you, Tom.
Okay, well, thanks. This looks like a great backroom for a Zoom call or something. You know, that's fantastic. I really appreciate it. Well, you know, I don't want to say a whole lot more about that other than to thank James and the wonderful team that he's assembled. Thank all of you, not just board members and executive committee members, but everybody who has worked with me. And I really thank you for the privilege of being able to serve the community in this way. I guess that is my clue to move on to the next part of our program, which is really the highlight. and that is to hear from our keynote speaker. You know the cliche, the man who needs no introduction, particularly in his hometown, but I think it's important, here he comes, I think it's important to say a few words, right? It's a great honor to have him with us, and it's a great honor for me to be able to introduce him. And maybe not everybody, we've got a lot of new folks in our community, so maybe not everybody knows the story of Tom Ridge. But Tom, of course, was born in Pittsburgh Steel Valley, but raised in Erie. Well known as one of our nation's most respected public servants. He's garnered the admiration of leaders across the nation and overseas. As a strong and visionary leader, Governor Ridge gained a deserved reputation as an innovator, not an ideologue, and is esteemed by individuals on both sides of the aisle. Following the tragic events of September 11, 2001, he became the first Secretary of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, marking the largest reorganization of government since the Truman administration. Previously, Governor Ridge served, of course, as the 43rd governor of Pennsylvania, where his aggressive technology strategy helped fuel the state's advances in economic development, education, healthcare, and the environment. Governor Ridge was first elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1982 and was overwhelmingly reelected to that position by Pennsylvania voters 5 times. Today, he's the chairman of Ridge Global and dedicates his time to continue serving the public as chair of the National Organization on Disability, and recently as the spokesman for Vote Safe, a cross-partisan coalition of election administrators and organizations that endorsed the simple principle that every American has the right to vote safely, even in the midst of the pandemic. So please join me in welcoming Governor Tom Ridge to the stage.
Well, that was a lovely introduction. Thank you for it. Thank you for the opportunity to spend some time with you this morning. Like everyone else, excuse me, COVID has affected lifestyles, both personally and professionally. And I still commute back and forth from DC to work, but it's given me an opportunity, excuse me, to think about a little bit more about my community. Thank you, Leslie. Taking care of Dad. Thank you. So when I was extended the opportunity to spend some time with you this morning, I accepted happily and readily, and I do have some thoughts I'd like to share with you. First of all, just give a brief comment about the national election. Up until the 2020 presidential election, I think the event most watched, observed globally was the World Cup. I think there are more people watched America's election this year than have ever even watched the World Cup for many, many reasons, and I think we can all as Americans appreciate and understand why. Historic turnout, not to my satisfaction. 66, 67% of Americans registered to vote voted. I still don't know what the other 1/3 are doing. I do believe that voting is not a privilege. I think it's a civic responsibility. I think if you're a citizen, there's a responsibility to vote. I can't help but think of yesterday, one of the things you didn't mention, Tom, that I'm most proud of in my lifetime is having worn the uniform of my country. A long time ago in a faraway place. And around the world, there are probably anywhere between 400 or 500 graves in the United States and elsewhere for men and women who, on the call of their country, responded to that call to protect and defend and promote democracy. And at the foundation of this democracy, the very foundation, before you talk about the institutions of government, before you talk about Wall Street, before you talk about Main Street, it's the vote. So while I think we should be proud that the participation was at historic level, I think in terms of civic education and embedding in the minds of our young people and old people that voting is a civic responsibility. So I'm pretty excited about the record numbers. Finally, observation, regardless of how you feel about the outcome and who your candidate was, I am hopeful that in time that the administration will proceed. They have claims, they're gonna have to establish them. I have a certain view on those claims, but let them proceed whatever legal path they choose. But people have no idea how important it is to begin that transition. And if there's no other reason based on my limited experience, but pretty in-depth experience, national security ought to trump every other reason to continue to facilitate the transition. So historic election, historic turnout, litigation go on, but I'm hopeful that in the next couple of days, the administration will agree to begin that process of transitioning. I'll just leave it at that, and if you want to get into Q&A, we can do that. But more importantly, I wanted to share some thoughts with you at the Erie Forward event. I just love that notion because it's called momentum. I just like that a lot. And I remember thinking during the past couple of days after I was invited to participate and share these thoughts with you about my own experience in this community. My dad was a naval veteran, World War II. We moved from Pittsburgh to Erie. Progress, I mean, we lived at 1416 Delaware Avenue. Veterans Assistant Public Housing, now they got the thruway through it. So, I mean, that's progress in and of itself. But I remember those halcyon days. I remember growing up. And I remember going in 12th Street, because it was part of the neighborhood. I remember Bucyrus, Erie, and I remember Lord Manufacturing. I remember a kid working construction. I worked at Hammermill. I remember how things were going down in GE. I remember how the schools were overflowing, both in the city and in the county, throughout the county. I remember the vibrant downtown State Street. I mean, I can close my eyes and see all those, not just institutions, but just the harmony, the excitement, the growth, the kind of community we had back then. I was very proud of it then. And one of the reasons, I think I've told this story before, my buddy Mike Fetzner heard it many times, but my dad had an opportunity several times because he was a salesman. He was destined to work 2 jobs all his life. But instead of getting promoted from his primary employer, he said, no, this is a place I want to raise my family. This is where I want to raise my children. This is where I want them to go to school. And hey, hopefully at some point in time, because I think it's a special place, they'll think it's a special place, and they'll be willing to come back, put their roots down in Erie, and grow and help the community grow. So here I am. Oh, this is my hometown. In spite of what that John Baer said, the Philadelphia newspaper ran for governor, that's the congressman nobody ever heard of from the city that's never been to. Well, they now know who I am, and they know where Erie is. And that's why I like the notion of Erie Forward, because we have to do things differently. We have to think and act anew, because it is a different community. And there have been changes. Some have been positive, and many people would say not positive enough. The second personal story I will tell you, my daughter works for the chamber. Many of you know my daughter. Leslie Hannah worked in Washington, worked in Boston, and she talked about coming back to Erie maybe 10 years ago. Hope you don't mind me telling the story, hon. I said, I don't know. Are you sure? It's a wonderful place. I think it's a special place. But I'm not too sure at this point in time. I'm a born optimist, but do you really want to invest the time and the effort? Do you really want to come back? Because I didn't get a sense of forward momentum. I just didn't. I'm sorry. I'm here, and I want to be here, and I'll always be here. But you know, you get a sense when you're in and out of a community, and I've been blessed to be so much a part of this community. You know, the couple of things that have always bothered me writ large, not just in Erie, but people say, well, you know, we've always done it that way. Well, progress is never made if your mindset is we've always done it that way, and we have to keep doing it that way. You can't progress as a community, as an individual. Thank God. Henry Ford didn't think about that. Thomas Edison didn't think about that. So I said to myself, how could I use the opportunity? By the way, my daughter's back here. My grandson's back here, and I really think about him too. This is a special place. I feel strongly about that. I think we need to celebrate Erie every chance we get, because there are many remarkable things about this community. The quality of life, the standard of living, the unique environment, the colleges, local community education that we have, the colleges, first-rate schools in this community, small, strong and small business community, which really is the epicenter, is the growth in this community. That's why when I look at Erie Forward, I think, boy, I love the notion as governor, the first thing you want to do is pay attention to retention. You got small, vibrant businesses here, and you got some large ones. So what do we do as a community to make sure that they stay and they expand internally? The first mission is, and you've recognized it in Erie Forward, let's make sure that what we have stays here and grows. And then the second mission is let's complement that. Let's figure out a way to grow other sectors based on the assets we have. We need to be the community that recognizes that we have potential because of the assets we have. We have to be realistic about what we can do. And I looked at this document, which I think is most impressive, and how you've identified 6 specific areas where you can build on the existing infrastructure you had. It's visionary, it's moving forward, and it's something that's greatly to be admired. So I think the challenge going forward is to, and I'd like to think that the chamber can be the catalyst for the public and the private sector. As you know, I've been privileged to work in government several decades. Although if you looked at the resume, you say, Ridge can't hold a job. The fact of the matter is I've had the opportunity to deal with economic development issues from a legislative side, an executive branch side, and now even as a perspective as a small business person. And there are no group of public officials, and I'm included in that group, and there's no single or several government programs that can actually, in and of themselves, drive growth or drive progress. Government officials, I say this respectfully since I was one, and government programs can complement and supplement what the community itself decides it needs to be done in order to set and meet the priorities the community sets for itself. That whole notion of public-private partnership is an expression that is often used. There's rhetorical tribute given to it, but sometimes it's not as robust as it needs to be. And sometimes, and I've seen this a great deal both in my political life and in professional life, there are so many well-intentioned efforts to accomplish goals, but they're segregated. They're isolated, they're silos. I read somewhere, talked to somebody here in the past couple of weeks, that there are probably 30 economic development organizations, both public and private, in Erie County. Think about that, 30. Now the question I ask is do they all sit at a round table? Or do they all operate independently? Do they collaborate? Do they share ideas? Do they get together to set community-wide regional priorities? That's a real challenge. And I'll give you a dramatic example of how bad it is to operate in silos and not really collaborate. I've been working with a bipartisan commission on biodefense for 5 years. 5 years. I won't bore you with the details, but in the course of these 5 years in this bipartisan commission, we identified over a dozen federal agencies and over 50 political appointees who all had some responsibility about biodefense. And we're in the middle of a pandemic. Think about that. Well-intentioned people, whether they're dealing with biodefense or economic development, operating independently, it just doesn't, it's not a very effective use of resources, community, public or private sector resources, and you never are able to build that infrastructure or that foundation to make progress, whether it's for economic growth or if it's for dealing with a potential pandemic or bio event. Perhaps there'll be some changes in a post-COVID environment. I don't say that as a criticism, because every one of those positions was filled by a man or woman who thought they could do something to make a difference, and every economic development corporation is filled with people in the public and private sector. They believe they can make a difference, but they'll never maximize their ability to make the difference, the regional difference, unless they sit down and work together and collaborate. The other challenge I think we have, I've said this before, we've always done things that way. So why should we change? Well, progress is built around change. And I think the change agents in this community, and I looked at the staff you have, James, I loved it, not just because I love my daughter and she's part of your staff, but they're young. Young, youth. There's some of the most vibrant contributions to this community. I had occasion to meet a couple of people just in the foyer here. People that I've met and talked to and maybe assisted years ago, maybe decades ago, moved back to Erie. They moved back to Erie. Why? Because they thought, like my father thought, and I think, and my daughter thinks, and I suspect most of you think, this is a special place. But you can't rest on your laurels. Can't rest on what it used to be in the 60s and 70s. It's Erie 2.0. It's the new Erie. It's the Erie going forward. So it's that attitude. Celebrate what we have. Be prepared to accept what we've done well in the past, but be totally prepared and open to inviting our young people. I remember last year before the COVID, I was in an event, and I don't recall what it was, but it was a group of people talking about economic development in Erie. And I took a look around in the audience. There were very few young people in the audience. One of the great privileges I've had in the course of my political life is the opportunity to engage students. Really rather remarkable. I did a webinar yesterday with the students from Penn State. How probative and intuitive their questions were. Really remarkable. But I tell young people, because historically they were the least inclined to vote, I said, I don't understand what your indifference is about this incredible process we have in self-government voting. I said, young people, you have more tomorrows than I do. Just look at the calendar. So you have more invested, or should be more invested, in the leaders you choose, the decisions they make, and personally in your own personal involvement in the community than I do. Because the calendar said you're going to spend more days in that community dealing with the consequences of that political leadership than I will. And I apply the same mindset to the young people in this community, the young people on your staff, the neighborhoods I've been through. I've been, because both my son and daughter, my son's not here, but I get a chance to hang with people in the late 20s and early 30s. Kind of makes you feel pretty good about it. Can't hang with them completely, but you do. Todd does the best he can. But the fact of the matter is, a community that wants to grow has to embrace young leadership, has to share those responsibilities, share those ideas, and let them percolate up and let them take over leadership. More importantly, let them be involved in the planning. Vision. This is what's so exciting about this document, the Erie Forward. It's a vision statement. And then you developed a strategy. You're going from the vision, this is what we want to try to do. We've got a strategy how to get there. Now we've got to execute the game plan. It's like politics, it's like governments, like anything else. And so I'm pretty excited about what you're doing, the Chamber's doing. Tremendous attitude. We're going to move forward. Tremendous commitment. You're here. In spite of COVID, you got people connecting with us digitally. You're committed to the community. And maybe more enthusiasm around the Chamber and what you're doing and what you want to do than I've seen in this community in a long time. Commitment, great attitude, embracing young people and their ideas. to make a difference in this beautiful community. This is a special place. I'm proud to be an Erie, Pennsylvania resident. And I want all these young people who've decided to come back to Erie and raise their families to live in a vibrant, energetic, progressive community. And finally, a couple of things. Other challenge we have, and I'm glad you're talking about diversity. We have a tendency from time to time, and I can say this because I've been in government for a long time. I live in Mill Creek, but I should be worried about what's going on in Erie. It's part of my broader community. You may live on the west side of Erie, the city of Erie, but you should be concerned about what's going on the east side of the community. And because you've been particularly successful in your life and in your business and in your community, you should be concerned about those who are not as successful or maybe haven't had the opportunity that you've had. Because as a region, we really grow together. You can only move forward as a community unless you do it together and you're mindful of those who may need. And that's why I love the kind of commitment to diversity that you've made and an appreciation, not only from diversity, but a regional approach. You know, if you have a leak in one part of your house, a leak in your roof in one part of your house, I dare say you don't say, well, that's all right. It's only one room. We can live comfortably in the balance of the house. No, you see a problem, you identify it, and you try to fix it. Well, there's some challenges associated, economic and social, racial in this community. It's out there. Let's accept that reality and collaborate and work together in order to address and redress whatever those challenges are, so as a community, we can grow together. We're only as strong as a community. We will be even stronger as a community when we bring the Chamber's attitude and the Chamber's commitment, when we collaborate with one another around a common vision, not worried about who gets credit, more concerned about how we build and progress forward. The Chamber's at the epicenter. There are no heads at a round table, but I think the Chamber can be the catalyst to move Erie forward. And I'm proud to have been given and grateful to have been given the opportunity to share these thoughts with you. It's a special place. Celebrate Erie. I'm going to call on the individual members of the Chamber. You're here or you're digitally connected to sustain that commitment. I know many of you have pledged. I think it was 5.2 million over 5 years. I think you're almost there. I'd love for us to exceed it. But more importantly, not only rhetorical, I mean, you helped write the plan. The Chamber helped with you, members wrote the plan, underwrite the plan. But from time to time, you may be called upon to contribute a little bit more time as we go ahead pushing Erie forward. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to share these thoughts with you. It's going to hope we have a little time for Q&A if you want, Tom, and it might be better than listening to a monologue, but thanks very much.
Okay, we do want to open, we would like to open for questions from the floor. I guess just to get started, maybe one political question, and then we could talk more about Erie. So polarization, we talked a lot about your background working in bipartisan fashion. Are we more polarized now than we ever were, and what can we do to overcome that in our country?
Yes. Ultimately, I think it comes down to, for me, it's about leadership. It's about civility. It's very difficult if I've got a dispute with my neighbor over a fence line, a tree, or a barking dog, to lean over the fence and yell and scream and demean my neighbor. We're never going to solve that problem if that's how I treat that individual. I remember back in the 80s when I was a young congressman, I was always in the minority, but the collaboration was different. I was able to get things done because I had friends on the other side. strong partisan environment, but we didn't demean each other. We didn't question each other's integrity. We didn't preach it. So I think the challenge for this country is one, all of us, not just political leaders, we try to be a little bit more civil, which is more and more difficult to do given the internet, which I think has great opportunity for us to become a stronger and better community and country, but it's also a place for bullies, ne'er-do-wells, and malcontents who stir up trouble unnecessarily, and they'll say things on the internet they wouldn't dare say to you in your face. So I think that's one of the circumstances that have exacerbated the partisanship. But beyond partisanship, I just think we have to return to civility. And I think we need leaders on both sides of the political aisle to be more civil. This is not a political statement, but it's an observation. I think leaders of the legislature, our Congress, and leaders within the administration, our president, have gone out of their way from time to time to personalize their criticism of each other's conduct and their policies. I think there's a way you can respectfully differ. I've always felt that way. And I think unless and until we as citizens demand that of our political figures, but also replicate it in our personal and business lives within our community, I'm not sure it's going to improve. But the only thing I will say to you, and people in this room knew that it's not a political statement, but everybody knows how Joe Biden's the first Democrat I've ever voted for as president. That's just my choice. I don't second guess anybody else's choice. But I remember him saying back in 2016 when Hillary Clinton said those Republicans are our enemies. He said, no, they're not. They are our opponents. It's more civility at the local level, personal level, community level. Insist on it from our leaders. But unless our leaders start treating each other with greater civility and deference, we're going to continue to be polarized more deeply than we need to be. I don't mind polarization. I'm a Republican. Some people are strong Republicans, strong Democrats, so we can agree, but it's how we disagree that's important.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from the audience on politics or on anything else?
I want to make one other quick observation. I could, you know, it's interesting in thinking about what I was going to share with you. I asked somebody about colleges in this community. There's one of our strengths in this community. I think they're a great strength. But I think the number was 72% of those graduate from Erie colleges leave. We ought to think about that. We also ought to think about the demographics and changing. We're still listen, I'm in that category now. I gotta tell you, I'm not sure I want to be called a senior statesman. That's just saying, well, he's an old guy, his time's gone and come and gone. But that's just the way it is. I mean, happily you can punch the ticket that I'm an older guy. People say it's good to see. I say I'd rather be seen than viewed. So I'm happy to be an older guy. But the fact of the matter is that we need to remind ourselves that we want to attract and retain young people, which means we have to think and act differently as we move Erie forward. Sorry, Tom. A little editorial there I wanted to throw out.
That's great. So looking at your success in economic development and otherwise in the state government, are there lessons, any particular lessons that you would bring to us from that experience as we look at our regional and local economic development?
Yeah, one of the lessons that I felt when I looked at the plan for Erie Forward, which I thought was really, I think it's very impressive. Again, you wrote it. I mean, James didn't write it. The chamber wrote it. And basically you said, this is the community that we think we can be, recognizing these are the assets that we have. Now, lightning might strike and somebody may decide to come in and build this monster company and create 5,000 jobs. And we're always open to that. But really, moving forward is about keeping what you have, and this is very consistent with my philosophy as governor. The first priority is to make sure that the businesses we have, large and small, continue to grow. And that's why when you've been out talking to businesses for business retention, spot on. That's what you got to do. But you can multitask. You can do that, and at the same time, you can say to yourself, okay, based on the assets we have, where do we think we have the greatest potential for growth? And I saw life sciences, I saw advanced manufacturing, I saw advanced business services, I said year-round travel and tourism, I saw technology and gaming, and there's like 6 of them there. And I thought, bingo, they know exactly what they want to do. They got a vision, they got a strategy, now they're trying to execute. So it's exactly what you need to do. So it's very consistent, I think, with the right kind of economic development mindset. But therein, where all these other economic development groups hopefully will coalesce and bring their resources and their capabilities around those six sectors where you think you can grow, in addition to keeping the businesses that are here viable, competitive, and strong. Government supplements that, but is no substitute for that.
Anyone from the audience? Yes, sir.
Hi, what should we be asking our state legislators on how to handle this pension deficit? We have Pennsylvania getting larger and larger. We have the public costs. Those that are left here.
Do I understand the question? What should the state legislature do with regard to the deficit primarily caused by COVID?
No, the state pension liability.
State pensions.
Oh. Well, it's been a long time since I looked at that figure. Well, the first thing you need to do is, again, I haven't looked at the stats. I don't know exactly what it is now. I've been 20 years plus removed from that, but going forward, may have to redesign it. So again, I don't know whether it's, is it defined benefit? I mean, okay, well, and that's the way it's been for a long time, permanently. Well, the first thing you need to do is they need to think about redesigning that, like a lot of the private sector companies have done, to see that there's now a joint contribution to that pension. So I guess, again, I'm not as familiar today as I might have been 20-some years ago, but the first thing you need to do is stop the bleeding, which may mean you need to change the kind of pension system that exists, so you don't further exacerbate the deficit, and then whatever resources they have available to kind of deal with it. But it's not unique to Pennsylvania. We've got, there are states that are, Illinois particularly, and some of the others are deep trouble. So I think it's a good question. I think the best person to answer that would be the governor and the legislature. But again, my thinking would be to redesign the program, stop the bleeding, and then how to address the deficit down the road. So I can't give you a more specific answer. I'm not trying to avoid it, but that's what I would start with.
So I think I'm going to ask the last question. I think the common thread here, whether it's political leadership, economic development, whatever, has been leadership. Actually, it's an intangible skill. So what's your advice to us on how we develop leaders? How do we learn those leadership skills? How do we model that as a community?
Can I come back and answer that question next week? No. Well, I think a couple qualities. I think everybody inherently has some leadership ability or skills in there, maybe just are too self-deprecating to recognize it. If you're a foreman in a shop, you may not consider yourself to be a leader, but you are. You may be there because of seniority, but chances are you're there because you have other qualities. You're a small businessman who's been able to build a business. You may not see yourself as a leader, but you've obviously had a vision. You had set goals and you worked hard to achieve those goals. So I think there's a lot of leadership embedded into what people do. I think in terms of economic development, I think it's very important that the community regionally listens to one another. And for the time being, it's difficult to do. Set aside these sometimes legitimate but very parochial parochial interest. I mean, one of the challenges in Pennsylvania has always been, it's the nature of who we are as a state, is we have so many political divisions and subdivisions. I mean, look at the number of school districts we have, look at the number of, and that's being a criticism, but we have a tendency to divide ourselves. And I think the big challenge in terms of leadership is you've got great leadership in a lot of these organizations, but pulling them together. And that's where I think the Chamber has such a unique opportunity to try to pull them together and harmonize their collective interest in moving Erie forward. So you got to collectivize that goal and then sit and work with them to achieve these priorities as personified in this document. I can't believe there's anybody out there that would look at this document and disagree that this is probably the best way for Erie to move forward. If there is, I'd like them to tell me. I mean, this is a third-party assessment along with your input saying, here's who we are, here's what we have, this is where we need to go. That in and of itself is a tribute to the leadership of individual members of the Chamber because you have coalesced around this document. So I think you just have to take advantage of the leaders that are there, and I think that the Chamber is uniquely positioned to kind of harmonize their thinking and help set broader regional priorities. That's what I said when I concluded my remarks. I know you wrote the plan. I know you're helping to financially underwrite it. I hope you go over the 5.2. But I'd also think from time to time that James and the Chamber can pull you in on other projects consistent with and supportive of these goals. Excuse me. Thank you.
Let's thank Governor Rich. Well, thank you again, Governor Rich. There's really no way we can improve on your remarks. You know, I think you've said it all, but we are at a place where if we're not going to celebrate our community and look to the future, I don't know any other better forum for that. You know, it occurs to me that the national media has been reminding us recently, as late as this morning in the Wall Street Journal, if you haven't seen it, it's a big article about Erie. They're reminding us of something that we already know, which is that we are a bellwether. We are a representative Erie community. We've got manufacturing and agriculture. We've got Democrat and Republican, old economy, new economy, all the things that we've mentioned, but on a manageable scale. And I think maybe it's because of that we've been blessed with some political leaders, Governor Ridge being, I think, the chief example, who you know, have been able to bring people together because we all live and work together in this diverse microcosm that we have here. So I think all of us as a chamber would share the goal that our community could continue to be a model for the nation and how to overcome bipartisanship and polarization as we work together, overcome partisanship and polarization as we work together really on all the challenges that we have. We need to get this COVID spread under control and the consequences under control for our community. We have the challenges of equitable, inclusive growth, all the things that have been mentioned, and we want to be part of that. I'm going to put in one last commercial for Erie Forward. Obviously, we still have a ways to go. We're very grateful to the Erie Community Foundation a couple of years ago for giving us a boost so that we could get started with the program. We had the major commitment from Erie Insurance that we announced a year ago. We've had many generous gifts from other donors who are getting us to the point that we need to be. Our public sector partners have been very helpful all along the way with this, and we want to give you a chance as soon as it's possible for your business to become an investor, because we think that the growth that's going to occur for our entire community will also help grow your own business. We have ambitious goals, but they can transform our community for decades to come. So in closing, I would like to again thank all of you for being here and for your continued support of the Chamber and of our community. A special thanks to our sponsors for today's event, Highmark, Knox Law, National Fuel, Curtsey Food Services, Erie County Redevelopment Authority, and McDonald-Illig Attorneys. So we will close our membership meeting. Again, I'd ask our members of the board of directors if they'd stay behind, either virtually or in person, for just a few minutes so that we can take care of some of our other business. But thank you. Enjoy the day. Enjoy the holiday season.